This presentation is going to give you an opportunity to think with me about the principles of bureaucracy and how they affect hierarchy in organizations. The notes that I'm presenting are all based on an article by Uriel Leviathan, which studied the drawbacks of hierarchy and how they can be overcome using examples from kibbutz communities in Israel. I've included a reference for this article at the end of the presentation. As I mentioned, bureaucracies have many advantages. The first advantage of a hierarchy is that tasks become clearly defined. People know what they're expected to do. They know what responsibilities they have, and they know what responsibilities they don't have. Another advantage of hierarchy is that it can improve managerial control. People know which managers have responsibility for which activities. Managers have a small span of control, often only a couple of people, and they're able to keep control of the area that they're responsible for. In addition, a hierarchy facilitates communication within the organization, both upwards and downwards. Directors communicate with managers, managers communicate with their staff. Staff members talk to their managers carry the message up to the directors. There's a logic and a flow to that makes sense to people. Some suggest that a hierarchy can decrease redundancy and even allow for better selection of employees, because you can put people into specific roles, see how they perform, and then see who makes a good candidate for higher level positions. A hierarchy in an organization also allows for differential rewards and pay systems. For example, it's not uncommon in an organization for upper level executives to have an entirely different reward system than rank and file employees. In addition, because people are in clearly defined roles, you can reward those who perform at a different level than those who do not perform as well. Finally, in a hierarchy, we know who are the people that can represent the organization to the outside world. This can make it clearer to others who's in charge and what this organization is about. While there are clearly advantages of a hierarchy, there are also many disadvantages. For example, while it's true that a hierarchy might facilitate communication, you can also have a loss of information. For example, a staff member may describe a problem to a manager, and that manager may not share it up the chain of command. Perhaps the manager doesn't know that that problem is happening in other parts of the organization as well. So there can be some significant losses of information. In addition, there can be limitations on initiative because of a hierarchy. If I know clearly what my role is and what my role isn't, then I might not be willing to take initiative outside of my area of influence. Often in a hierarchy, change is more difficult because people are more entrenched in their roles and are less flexible. In addition, there may be too much dependency on a few leaders, and people might not be willing to step up and take responsibility because they can leave that responsibility to their leaders instead. Sometimes managers stay in their positions for too long of a period of time, which can lead to both a risk of stagnation as well as a risk of corruption. A final disadvantage of hierarchy is that it can lead to poorer decision making because of the different items that we've talked about earlier. An additional and somewhat troubling disadvantage is that in a hierarchy, inequality is often very common. There are typically significant advantages to being a leader or manager in an organization as opposed to being one of the members of the organization. And these advantages to being higher in the organization or hierarchy can have many different dimensions. Typically, a leader will have more authority, will receive a higher level of rewards, will have more control, will have more opportunities for self-development, and will often feel that his or her needs are being met more completely. In fact, there's even research that shows that those in higher positions tend to have better levels of health and well-being. The consequences of this kind of inequality are things like lost motivation, lost satisfaction, and lost commitment. In addition, there are often negative self-images for people lower in the organization, and communication may become much slower. One of the more interesting examples of how to overcome the fundamental inequities in a hierarchy comes from Leviathan, who studied how kibbutz communities in Israel deal with the issue of inequality. Kibbutzes use a number of different methods, including methods that promote more direct democracy, managerial rotation, participative management, leadership teams instead of individual leaders, semi-autonomous committees, flat organizations, and a deliberate blurring of the lines of status. Let's talk about some of those in more detail. For example, managers often have something that looks like term limits, where they can only hold office for a specific period of time. When they finish their job as the leader, they don't necessarily move up or over to another role that's similar, but they may very well move back down into the rank and file. This increases the number of people who hold managerial office and lessens the opportunity for corruption, since people aren't in the same role forever. It increases the base of potential managers because it elevates the skills of the rank and file. In fact, many of the rank and file have served in managerial roles at one time or another. From a participative management standpoint, kibbutzes tend to work much more as teams with coordinators who coordinate the teamwork. They expand the percentage of people who are, quote, in the center of the decision-making realm in the community, end quote, according to Leviathan. This deepens everybody's knowledge and prepares many people for management roles. Typically, this will enhance unit effectiveness. As I mentioned earlier, many of the kibbutzes have leadership teams instead of individual leaders. For example, someone managing a particular area may be a team of two, which spreads the influence around a little more, decreases the potential for corruption, and provides leadership continuity during the managerial rotation, as they typically will rotate in and out of those leadership roles at different times. Semi-autonomous committees do much of the work before they bring recommendations to what's known as a General Assembly, which acts as direct democracy where each person has the opportunity to vote and participate. In addition, in a kibbutz, there is a deliberate attempt to make sure that no one has a higher social status simply because he or she is in a managerial role. Now, obviously, all of these methods are not appropriate to all organizations. However, many different organizations can implement bits and pieces of these methods to mitigate the disadvantages of hierarchy. For example, many organizations have some type of participative management, which involves more people in the decision-making process. Many nonprofit organizations use some kind of managerial rotation. For example, I sit on a board of directors where the president of the board is president for only 1 year. He or she then moves back onto the board and someone else becomes president. These are all possibilities for organizations that are trying to become more equal in the way people are treated.